Mr. Gallagher, welcome back to the program. Great to have you. As many people know, he is from Wisconsin, home of Giannis, who will forever be known for this.
There's no failure in sports.
All right, so we know that in Wisconsin, everyone gets a trophy, and Chairman Gallagher keeps coming back to explain the Wisconsin point of view. Good morning, Chairman.
What a wonderful welcome that was, Hugh. Good morning. Great to be with you.
Let's play that again. Just want to make sure that you hear it again because this is the Wisconsin theme song again.
There's no failure in sports.
I just want people to know in Wisconsin, everyone gets a trophy. Mr. Chairman, I had Peter Baker on earlier, and this is serious. Let me start with the navalist story. Have you read the Telegraph yet this morning?
I have not read the Telegraph this morning.
Well, the lead story is killer whales learn to sink yachts off Gibraltar. And apparently White Gladys, that's her name, has been attacking and damaging yachts. Now, your eyebrows went up. Do you think the Chi-Coms are involved with this? Because if the killer orcas are taking on boats, you're a navalist, aren't you?
I am. I've actually been thinking a lot about this because an orca is an apex predator. And my good friend Matt Pottinger recently compared the Chinese Communist Party to a baby dolphin that we kept feeding and feeding until it turned into a great white shark. So I did an exhaustive Google search to see what animal in the water could defeat a great white shark. And putting aside the possible existence of a giant squid, an orca, particularly a pod of orca, is the only thing that could beat a great white shark. And if you say orcas with an Australian accent, AUKUS, it sounds like AUKUS, which is the alliance that we need to defeat the Chinese Communist Party. So there's a lot to learn from these very crafty and intelligent creatures.
Well, I didn't know how I was going to transition to the China story, but you did a very fine job of that, and I would like to thank you for that. But, talk of winning wars is not consistent with the Wisconsin way as articulated by Giannis. Can we play that again?
There's no failure in sports.
No, so if there's no failure in sports, how can there be failure in war?
Point of order. Wisconsin won both World Wars and the Cold War. Douglas MacArthur from Wisconsin, pivotal role in World War I and World War II. And George Kennan from Milwaukee articulated the strategy of containment that guided us, though it had various instantiations throughout the Cold War. So Wisconsin has won every war that America has won in the 20th century, Hugh.
Do you know that George Will says the Cubs saved freedom because Ronald Reagan went to Avalon Island to cover spring training for the Cubs. He stayed to become an actor and became famous, then governor, then defeated the Soviet Union. So you can sit down with George Will and have that conversation. Let's go to the China article that Peter Baker and David Sanger wrote. Biden sees coming thaw with China, even as he rallies allies against Beijing. And it goes on and it reads this. It was easy to miss Mr. Biden's prediction on Sunday of a coming, quote, thaw in relations with Beijing. It is far too early to say whether the president's optimism is based on quiet signals he has received. Here's the key graph. Mr. Biden's own aides see a struggle underway in China between factions that want to restart economic relations with the United States and a far more powerful group that aligns with President Xi Jinping's emphasis on national security over economic growth. This is the softliner, hardliner in Iran argument that has always been fake. There are no two groups in China, are there, Mr. Chairman?
No, there's a dictator. His name is Xi Jinping. And I really worry about this because where's the evidence for it, right? We've seen the balloon incident, and remember that the State Department, according to some Reuters reporting, really desperately tried to suppress the balloon incident, held back sanctions, held back export controls in an effort to preserve Secretary Blinken's visit to Beijing. What else have we seen from China? We've seen a raid on Bain & Company's Shanghai office. We've seen actions against Micron. We've seen the passage of a new intelligence law giving them basically unlimited powers over any business operating in China. So even if there is a faction, let's say, that favors engagement with the West, or that China is now open for business. Their finance minister, Liu He, went to Davos, said as much. It is to the benefit of the Chinese Communist Party and to the detriment of the United States and the West. How much more evidence do we need that the economic engagement theory has failed? We have over 2 decades of evidence. It's not going to produce a moderation in their behavior. So Biden sees a thaw on the horizon. I'm worried, as I've discussed many times on your program, that there is a war on the horizon because Xi Jinping will be increasingly emboldened to take Taiwan.
So this is This is nothing but appeasement again. And I want to remind people, appeasement is a theory. It is not. It's not intended as a condemnation. It's an ideology that was in the saddle in the 30s, which is you can deal with the worst regimes on the planet. You can use carrots, not sticks. It never works. It has never worked. And the two factions thing, I sniffed that right out, Peter Baker and David Sanger. And I don't doubt that that's what they believe. It's just so profoundly wrong to think that China is other than an apex predator, right? That's what they are. They're like, let's negotiate with the velociraptor and the orcas. That's not going to work.
It's the great white, which Pottinger also had a great metaphor to say that great whites aren't offended when divers build cages around themselves in order to protect themselves. That's just the way it works. So we need to build guardrails around our relationship with China so they don't continue to steal our intellectual property. They don't continue to steal sensitive technology. They don't use our money and our technology in order to perpetrate genocide and build a military that is capable of taking Taiwan and capable of killing many Americans. This is what we're discussing on the Select Committee. And this morning at 9:30, we're going to have our first business meeting, which is a meeting to discuss and hopefully endorse a set of policy recommendations. There'll be two reports. One is focused on defense and conventional deterrence across the Taiwan Strait based on the war game we did, based on the engagement we did with President Tsai. And the other is based on the hearing we did on the ongoing genocide in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region and has a lot of economic focused recommendations. So I'm cautiously optimistic that our Democratic colleagues will join us. We've tried our best to make these bipartisan yet tough. And so the Select Committee is going to be tackling this issue of selective economic decoupling and de-risking. It comes down really, Hugh, we just, at a basic level, as a matter of principle, we don't want to be funding our own destruction. And that's what we've been doing for far too long. And I'm worried that this revival of engagement, this zombie détente, zombie engagement, it really satisfies the literal definition of insanity, hoping for a different outcome, despite having tried this over and over again.
Oh, it's appeasement, and it didn't work in 36, didn't work in 37, didn't work in 38, and more came in 39. So, Chairman Gallagher, where can people get those reports when they come out today?
We'll post them on our website after, assuming we get an endorsement out of the business meeting this morning at 9:30. We've tried to make them readable, legible. Just one caveat, Hugh, because I can already anticipate your complaint that we didn't solve everything. This will not be a comprehensive list of everything that needs to be done in the Indo-Pacific. This will be a targeted list of things we believe the 118th Congress can pass and get done, and that President Biden can sign, and then we can iterate based on that. These are meaningful ways we can enhance near-term deterrence over the next year and a half, but there's far more that we will need to do, so we will not be done talking about these issues. I mean, let's say you put in place a near-term strategy to deter Xi from invading Taiwan. Well, you still need to confront the big issue we've been talking about for 7 years, which is how do you build a bigger Navy and Air Force? And it's just been like Lucy and Charlie Brown with the football for the last 7 years. And we've had weak service secretaries, we've had weak secretaries of defense, and we haven't had a president who's a navalist willing to break through the bureaucracy and empower a secretary of defense to actually do the things that need to be done in order to ensure deterrence holds, not just for the next 2 years, but for the next 50 years.
Yeah, I've got a very smart retired Marine Corps general officer who sends me analyses on China. And he asked me, and I'm going to ask you, he didn't ask me to ask you, but I'm going to ask you, why are we not sending the harpoons that we're putting off into a warehouse, even if they're not perfect weapons? Why is the good the enemy of the perfect? And then why don't we have an end state described? What is the end state of our China policy? What do we want the end state to look like, Mr. Chairman? Small question and major question.
On the harpoon issue, this will be addressed in our report, knock on wood. I mean, it's in the text right now. We heard testimony from retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, who has a creative idea for how you can MacGyver some of these harpoons. I think it makes a ton of sense, particularly if the harpoons, the variants that the Taiwans bought aren't going to get there until 2027 at the earliest. That's just too late. We need to be moving much faster than that. On the end state question, simplistically, we could go back to Reagan and say we win, they lose. I think really in the short term, it's obviously deterring Xi Jinping. It's preventing World War III, to put it more provocatively. over the long term, you have to tease out what does winning the strategic competition looks like. It's preventing them from becoming the dominant power in Asia as well as the dominant power globally. It is, to quote testimony we got in our first hearing, what could be called constrainment, preventing them from realizing their near-term territorial ambitions as well as their long-term ambitions to dominate the commanding heights of the economy, of technology, as well as corrupt every multilateral institution, particularly the UN, so it serves Chinese purposes. And ultimately what they want is the triumph of world socialism and the inevitable demise of global capitalism. So we should stop them from doing that. We should prevent them from destroying American leadership. And those are the stakes. That's why I've described this as an existential competition.
So I want to land that plane again. When the general says, what is the strategy of the United States? You said prevent war with China and stop any of their territorial ambitions, which would include Taiwan and the First Island chain. What about things like the militarization of the shoals? What about their Belt and Road Initiative? Is their rollback? We don't want regime change. I don't think anyone's talking about that. But land the plane again so we can explain it to a Steelers fan.
Well, I think it's less about this or that island and more about command of the seas. They really have a concerted sea power strategy. And command of the seas actually gives you command of the global economy. It's sort of what enables their de-dollarization strategy and what they're doing with central bank digital currency. They want to be the dominant naval power in the world. So in the short term, it's deterring a war over Taiwan. And over the long term, it's maintaining the primacy of the free world and constraining their worst impulses. But honestly,
primarily through Navy power, primarily through naval power.
Sea power is going to be, if you just look at a map of the Indo-Pacific, sea power is dominant. We need a sea power focused strategy because there's a lot of water on that map. That's
what my general friend was looking for, well articulated. For someone who believes in participation trophies in Wisconsin, that was well articulated. A we win, they lose strategy is not what Giannis believes in. I can't see your hand.
You got to be Orcas, Hugh, all right?
Be Orcas, attack yachts. Go read your Telegraph right now. Read my Twitter feed. It's got the Orcas story, which is, you should lead off the hearing with that today. Stay tuned, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That's Chairman Gallagher. Thank you, Chairman.